This car is not abandoned. It is, done. D-O-N. It is done. It's done. Welcome to Drift, Sweat, and Gears and the Castle of Catastrophic Cars. We are here with my 1989 Honda Prelude SI 4-wheel steering, and in this video, we're actually going to do a proper how-to, which is something that I don't do very often because most of the time, I don't know how to do it. But in this case, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's one of those rare times. In this video, we're going to talk about shocks. Because recently, when I was driving my Prelude, I noticed on the freeway when I was hitting bumps on the road, the car was kind of floating. It didn't really know what to do. So in this video, we're going to diagnose suspension, and we're going to talk about the ways that shocks could fail, and then we're going to walk through how to replace a shock on this car. Now, full disclosure, this car is a little bit different from your average Honda Prelude. It's sitting on coilovers. I know it's a little bit high to be saying coilovers, but trust me, you'll see for yourself. This has a K-Sport coilover suspension. And the reason for the failure of these shocks is not a knock on K-Sport. I want to get in front of this while I can. I have actually had these shocks on this car for 18 years. And yes, this is the third shock that I've done on this car and has failed in the exact same way. But again, in 18 years of ownership and almost 100,000 miles of driving, I am satisfied. These have performed to expectation. Now, we've already done the rears in the past. We've done both rears, one back in like 2016, a long time before I started doing YouTube, and another one just last year when I thought I was having trouble with my four-wheel steering setup. It's actually a lot safer to have coilovers on this car than it is to change the shocks on a regular spring setup. Now, of course, when we say coilovers, that is shorthand for adjustable height coilover suspension because the regular design of the Prelude suspension is called technically coil-over shock suspension. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the ability to adjust the height of the car and the spring rate with the turning of the threads on the shock body. So before we talk about how shocks fail, let's quickly go over what normal spring compression and rebound is supposed to look like. Let's go to the rear of the car. Now this car is pretty much going to get one bounce because it has a stiff suspension. We get one bounce and then maybe a little bit of shaking as weight transfers. And it's probably going to be the same here on the Volkswagen. In fact, I can't even press it down because this car weighs like 6,000 pounds. And we're going to see the same thing on the motorcycle where we get compression, rebound, and the whole thing is shifting because it's a motorcycle. Let's take a look at the most common case of failure in shocks. Down on my Triumph TR7. This is my 76 Triumph TR7. It is a terrible car with a terrible suspension system. The shocks all around are blown, and as you can see, the whole thing just shakes. It's bouncy, it's shaky, and you can pretty much dribble this car down the street if you tried hard enough. You could definitely flip it over, but on the Prelude, it fails in a different way. Let's go take a look. This is the failed shock on my Honda Prelude, and we're going to go ahead and press down on it. You see what's happening here? Nothing is happening. And when they seize up like that, it definitely feels a lot different than when shocks are basically doing nothing. Now, when this happens, the car just kind of bounces off and wants to launch into space. At least this corner of the car does. So it feels really weird and straight up dangerous to drive on the freeway, because it is. There's one more thing you can look for to see evidence of a blown shock, and that is oil on the shock body. I didn't cover it in this demo because I have prior experience with blown shocks in this car, and it also could be a bit tricky to get your eyes into such a tight space. But you will see later in this video that this shock is blown, and it is in fact covered with oil on the shock body. Let's get some tools, We're going to loosen the lug nuts and then get this car up on the jack, and we're going to get to work. You know, a lot of people will just attack it with an impact driver, but since my lug nuts have paint on them, I don't want to ruin the finish. So we're going to loosen by hand, and then we can use our electric ratchet driver from there. So as you can see, I got the jack under it, but I also have a jack stand as a backup. Always want to use jack stands when you lift the car up. Don't mess around with that, because if this car falls, you might be under it, and, well, you might die. So now that this thing is off the ground, everything's loosened, let's take off the lug nuts. It should be as simple as just ripping them off with our little ratchet driver here. So the wheel is off, and next step is to disconnect the shock fork down here. This, I believe, is a 17 millimeter bolt and nut. Really straightforward. And then we've got, I believe this is a 14 millimeter bolt here. So once you take out those two bolts, this fork can drop down and just kind of hang out on the axle. That frees up the shock to be removed from up here. From there, we've got 3 bolts here. You may or may not have a strut bar. You may or may not have relocated your battery to the trunk. So one of the things I'm going to do out of an abundance of safety is go turn off the power to the front of this car. There you go. Okay. You saw me struggle a little bit to remove the lower fork, and that's because I've got a really stiff white line sway bar. If you have stock suspension or stock sway bars, this is going to go a lot easier because you could just push down on the whole knuckle and this thing will clear the shock, and you'll be able to remove it. You know, I'm talking about safety steps every step of the way because, well, if I'm going to show you how to do something, I want to show you how to do it in a way where you're not going to hurt yourself. Because if I show you how to do something and you do something wrong because I left out some detail important to safety, then, well, not necessarily that you could hold me liable, but I have a moral obligation to help you in a way that is most beneficial to you. And that means not hurting yourself. Now that the shock is disconnected, we should be able to just drop it right out. There we go. And you can see here, we've got some oil at the bottom of the shock body. We can reassemble this with our new shock. Now this is where things get very specific to adjustable coilover setups. You see I have what I removed and what I put in. If you have stock suspension, you cannot do what I'm about to do. And the reason is because stock springs are much longer and they need to be compressed to fit on the shock. If you release a stock spring from a shock body without the proper spring compressors, this thing will launch like a missile and it will injure you and or kill you. It is seriously dangerous, and I cannot overemphasize the need for safety here. Now, when I do suspension jobs involving stock, shock, and spring coilover setups, I always just take the assembly down to the shop and have them do it. And that's because the spring compressors that you can rent at AutoZone or buy online where they just clamp to the side of this thing and compress it, those are super sketchy. You may be able to do it, and you're probably going to leave a comment do it saying, "Oh, I do this all the time." To me, it's not worth it to me because the shop has a floor-mounted spring compressor that stands up, and at standing height, you can lock this thing in, grab all 4 hooks into the spring and compress them with equal force all at once in one go. And then when it's compressed, you drop the old one out and slip the new one in within seconds. The ones that you rent from AutoZone are you have an impact driver on one side, you squeeze it in a little bit, and then you got to squeeze the other side a little bit, so you're never really applying equal pressure in all 4 corners. So that means the spring can bind, it can flex in ways that it's not supposed to flex, and it's still really, really dangerous. So I'm not going to recommend that you do it. If you want to do it, that's on you. Take it to the shop and just have them do it. It'll cost you like $20 a spring. It's a small investment for your safety. These are a set of coilover hooks. I don't know if they're the ones that came with K-Sport, but they're going to help us out here. We want to loosen this one, which is going to suck. I'm going to smash my hands together. I already know this. Okay, let's start up here. It just freed itself. I guess the PB blaster worked. I got a little bit lucky, and it happened exactly as I had the camera off. So unfortunately, you didn't get to see it, but it worked. Let's measure this dirt line, because it seems like I'm cleaning it up as I unthread this. I want to get the right... I don't have a fucking tape measure. All right, that's fun. Let's count threads. That's super scientific. 20. It's on like thread 20. Thread 21 is dirty. So that's the height of the car. All right, we got all of the little pieces off. Spring is off. We are ready to... Oh, that is messy, messy. Let's do a quick comparison to see if... yeah, they're about the same height. So if we count 20 threads... the car should be at the same height that it was when we started this little endeavor. So now that we have everything free, we don't care about this old shock. We're going to go ahead and tighten our vise right over it so that we can stop this stupid nut from spinning. There you go. Oops, we want that. We do want that. Now that it's apart, you want to make sure to put it back together the way you took it apart. And so we've got all these little bits here. You need to be aware of where they all go as you're taking it apart. So we got this little collar here that locks the, that the top hat sets on. You need to tap that loose with a hammer. And when you don't have a hammer, everything becomes a hammer. Now, let's get a real hammer. There you go. That, I'm surprised they didn't send a replacement. I'm also surprised they didn't send a replacement boot, which is really disappointing because this boot is pretty well trashed. So this is a boot and bump stop, and the boot part of it's gone. So we're just going to have to slip the bump stop over. Yeah, that's as good as it's going to get. And then we're going to reassemble this thing. Like that. And then the top hat. And then the top bushing. Now we get the bolt. We're just going to thread this on for now. Worry about tightening it later. So now let's flip it back over. K-Sport, when they originally designed the suspension. They had the threads of the shock body exposed like this, like the exposed steel. You see in the new design, they've coated it, and that's to resist corrosion. But in this one, because I could see that it was going to corrode, it was one of the main complaints about them. I sprayed it with clear coat when I first installed this back in like 2007. That turned out to be a really good idea because it was a lot easier to remove than it could have been. It could have been way worse. Oh, I forgot how it goes together. Nope. It goes like that, and then like that. And when you're tightening these things down, you do not need to compress the springs. You actually don't want to, because if you compress the springs, you're actually going to change the spring rate in these guys. So you just want it snuggish. Like, you still want to be able to twist the spring around, but you don't want it flopping around. So now that the initial ring is on, you need to put the lock ring for that in. This little lip in my other shocks, I have them turned down in relation to this so that the lip touches the other ring. And that's probably so that they don't seize up. Guys, just a little bit of a tighten here. We don't need to go crazy. It just needs to not rattle itself apart. Now that that's on, we have the lock ring for the bottom of the shock. And so that, probably want to give it the same orientation right about there. So we have it all assembled, but it looks like I want to tighten this just a little bit more. The spring is, there's just ever so little amount of play in it, and I want it to be just barely snug. Okay. Now we're ready to reinstall. The spring is snug. It's not flopping around, but it's also not compressed. This would be a good opportunity to clean everything, but since I'm out of carb cleaner, I'm committing a capital crime right now. So we're not going to forget to tighten this top lock nut, but we need to do some other things before we can do that. Let's get this thing back in. We're going to readdress the top in a second. Let's get the bottom fork on. All right, I had to have a conversation with my car, but I got the fork back onto the shock body, and we can move forward with no hard feelings, yeah? First, let's get this bolt that I struggled so hard to line up started. And then we're going to get this one in, because this isn't going to be a complete pain in the ass. Again, because of my ridiculous sway bars, I got to push the whole knuckle down. There you go. There you go. That's about all it needs to be. And we're just going to give it another double check. There's a torque spec on this, but it needs to be tight. All right, now we want to put our bolt through the fork with our brake hose bracket. And then once you run it in, of course you want to tighten it to spec with your precision torque wrench. Click. There we go. First thing is this bolt that went through the center into the shaft. Have washers that come with your shocks. You want to make sure that you put them back, because then the thing will rip itself out. Ask me how I know. And we get with our precision torque wrench. Click, click, click. Now we're ready to put the wheel back on. Isn't that exciting? This would be a good chance to check your brakes and all of that stuff. But since I had this suspension apart like, I don't know, 5,000 miles ago, it's okay. I'm fine. 19 millimeter and adapter, and we're going to run these on. We're going to run these on loosely, and then we're going to tighten them with our torque wrench for real. The reason why you want to put this on loosely first and not just run them in with the impact one right after another is because you want the rim to seat in the cone of the lug nuts correctly. Because if you get that wrong, you'll trash things. All right, now that that's on, we can torque them down. But let me get this thing on the ground. By removing our jack stand and lowering the car. Now this last step, a lot of people will just run it on with an impact, and I've done that for, you know, most of my life, but recently I've switched to using a torque wrench just out of an abundance of caution. The torque spec on these, I believe, is something like 80 pounds, which is not very much. So I'm going to torque them down to 90, but I'm going to do it in 2 steps. So I got my torque wrench, my actual torque wrench, and we're going to tighten it to 60 pounds first, just to get them all even. And then we're going to go up to 90. Now they're tightened to 90. That's a little bit over spec, but it's not enough to damage the threads. I know this because I used to tighten it way tighter than that for like 20 years. So they're fine now, and they're going to continue to be fine. But torquing them down to spec is just going to make sure that I don't, for one, damage the lug studs, but two, I don't want to damage the rims either. Now that this is all back together, last thing we want to do is adjust the rebound, because these are adjustable shocks. You can adjust the rebound on these things, and I have them like all the way loose. They're 32-way adjustable. So let me go get my little Allen key, and we'll make that happen. So when you're adjusting these things, you got this Allen key, and you want to just run it all the way in, and then you turn it all the way tight. Turn it to the right until it stops. That's all the way tight. I have it, I believe, all the way loose. So I have it turned 32 clicks to the left to its softest setting. But let's go double check on the other side to make sure. So this was 14 clicks in, and I kind of liked it there. So we're going to repeat that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that it's adjusted, let's check to see if it has any bounce. It does. You get 1 bounce. That's it. We're good. That means we're good to go. We should be able to take this out on test drive. That also means this car is not abandoned. It is done. D-O-N. It is done. It's done. Damn it. I was trying to make a funny joke. We have a whole other window that we could try this again on. It's no longer abandoned. It's done. There. Now we can take it on a test drive. Let's go on a drive. We're going to turn the AC off because we don't need it. And I haven't driven this car in, oh God, 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. It's been a while, and I sure do miss it. This car drives really, really nice. I mean, we're not going very fast, but it's pretty much exactly as it should be. I don't need an alignment because we didn't change the height of the car. We also didn't touch any of the suspension components that an alignment touches, like the upper control arms, like the radius rods or anything like that. So we shouldn't need an alignment. We shouldn't need, we may need to adjust the height just a little bit if it's like, you know, a 1/4 inch off or something. But if it's within tolerance, once we get back into the garage, we'll do one more measure. And if I have to adjust it off camera, I will. It's totally not a big deal. I'm just so happy to drive a decent car again. It's either been the ID4 or the Miata, and the ID4 is boring. I don't mind it as a car. I hate the Volkswagen software. I know I did a video saying that, you know, this is a great car from getting to point A to point B. It is, and it's really efficient. It's I haven't had to do anything to it or really spend a dime on it. But the software is so annoying, and sometimes you just really want an analog, visceral experience, and that's what this Prelude is so good at. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed, and we're actually going to do something a little bit different this time around. I'm going to include some bonus content, and this is going to be a little bit of an experiment with the YouTube algorithm. I believe it was the Spiffing Brit that had this idea of testing to see whether or not releasing your video and then shortening it would affect the YouTube algorithm and, you know, boost your engagement stats so that your video would have like a second wind after you made the cut. We're going to do that here because we need to do some work on the trucks. And it's really not enough work to justify its own video because it's really just, you know, putting wheels onto trucks. But we're going to do a little bit of work to our trucks as a bonus to this video. And after 5 days, that bonus content will be removed forever, never to be seen again. So if you're watching this video after that 5 days has expired, well, it sucks to suck. You should have liked, shared, subscribed to my video and hit the bell so that you can know when my videos come out and watch them right away. If you are one of the lucky ones that get to see the bonus content, or unlucky depending on how you feel about it, congratulations. Oh no, don't hit the cat! Oh my god. Katie made it. But as I was saying, if you are one of the ones unlucky enough to watch the video, thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for enjoying my content. And as always, if you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And if you don't like what you see, maybe you think I'm a big wussy for not using spring compressors in the garage, leave a comment anyway. I want to hear from you. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.